Good morning, guys. Welcome to the podcast and happy Monday. Our guest today comes from North Carolina and he's got an extensive background. He went to law school and now we're going to talk about his journey, his mindset, family. He helps families with legal challenges around divorce, custody disputes, adoption. He's also addresses the audience with entrepreneurial pain points, scaling, marketing, and leadership growth. And I'm really happy to have him on. He's well versed on a lot of different podcasts. And Jonathan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, briefly, just talk about, just briefly, and then we'll talk about your areas of expertise for the audience.
All right. Well, anyway, my name is Jonathan Breeden, and I am a divorce family law attorney in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina. We have our primary location being in Garner, North Carolina. And the most famous person from Garner, North Carolina is Scotty McCreery, the country music singer. Anyway, he won American Idol many years ago, and I know a ton of people that know him. They say he's a really great guy. Anyway, so I've been here. I started my own law practice straight out of law school at 25 years old here in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina in October of 2000. I only knew maybe 3 or 4 people in the entire county of Johnston County when I came here. But, I felt like it was a growing area. It was an area that was being managed well. And with the growth of the Raleigh and the Research Triangle Park with NC State and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill and Duke University and IBM and Red Hat and all of those great companies, SAS, it was a great place to be. And so that's why I set up here. I grew up in a small town on the North Carolina-South Carolina line called Laurinburg, North Carolina. It had about 25,000 people. It's about 30 miles from south of the border for all of you that have been up and down I-95 and crossed the North Carolina-South Carolina line. Anyway, you've seen that sort of Mexican-themed amusement park on the side of the road. I grew up not far from there. And, it was fairly standard small town, middle class, childhood. My father was a CPA who worked for himself. My mom was an emergency room nurse. And, graduated from high school and went to NC State. And then I went on to law school. So it's been an interesting ride. I don't think there's anything super special about me. And I believe that if any of you listening to this, I like to listen to this podcast, work hard and put your mind to it and not quit, you can achieve whatever you would like to achieve. And that's one of the reasons I like coming on podcast and talking about some of the stories that have led to my success.
I love your passion. And so one thing is, because you're entrepreneurial at heart and a lot of it revolves around personal growth and mindset. So one thing that I was listening to, I always listen to Think and Grow Rich, one chapter a day, and he's talking about really take inventory of your thoughts, your beliefs, your perceptions every day, like every second. And you talk about scarcity mindset. And so what are some common themes or traits that listeners can identify with to say, oh, that's a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset?
Yeah. And I've just become aware of the sort of scarcity mindset here in the last 3 or 4 years, as human beings, I said our core, and look, I'm not a psychologist and I've not been in a lot of psychology classes. I've read Think and Grow Rich twice, along with several other books. But I do think as human beings, we're still animals. And at our core, we're making thousands of decisions every second. Am I hot? Am I cold? Am I hungry? Am I scared? Are you dangerous? Are you safe? With our subconscious mind. And so I do think to be an animal with reason, but an animal that needs to live, you do have to sort of focus on scarcity so that you can be safe and can eat and can survive and can procreate and all of those types of things. But that can, outside of sort of meeting your basic needs, that can hold you back in any kind of business or entrepreneurial setting that you find yourself in if you don't recognize that whatever you kind of want in the world is out there, and have an abundance mindset where if you want it, you can achieve it, but you got to do something to go get it, right? So many people end up in this paralysis by analysis type thing where they come up with all these reasons why they're not going to be successful and their anxiety overruns them. And it happened to me and I still have to fight it every day. And they don't make decisions to move forward. They don't make decisions to make one step better, to be 1% better today than they were yesterday. And it stops them from being able to move forward because they're afraid and they're focusing on the fact that there's not enough, that they may not be successful and all of that. When if they would just make a decision to be better today than they were yesterday and take small steps to be better and educate themselves and read books and listen to podcasts and watch YouTube and all of the free information is out there. You don't have to go to college. You don't have a formal education. There's so much information out there that you can get yourself for absolute free. If they took advantage of that, it would help them move forward and focus more on an abundance and realize that everything they want is out there to be had. You just have to take steps to go doing it. And you also have to realize that if you don't make a decision to better yourself, to get education, to get out of a job you hate and get into something that you enjoy where you can move forward, then that is a decision. No decision is a decision. And that's a problem I see with a lot of people in this world.
Yeah, I love that. And, recently we talk about the disease of mediocrity, the disease of the middle class. And so, one thing that really stood out to me is like, I did an experiment with myself where I removed the outcome, where the outcome didn't matter. And I found myself, even though you have enough time, the outcome didn't matter, I caught myself repeating the same stories and the same perceptions. And it was really fascinating. It's just like how your brain is, these years and years of conditioning, how it automatically wants to go to those particular emotions. So, next question I have for you is, so this scarcity mindset, and you talk about perfectionism, and somebody really said that, perfectionism is an excuse, and they're being cowards because they're afraid to fail. So they have to make this excuse that everything has to be perfect. So how can people overcome this disease of perfection?
What I try to tell myself, and look, I got to fight this every day, right? Like, no matter how much success you have, you are who you are. What I try to remember and tell myself is that 95% of the things that you're worried about today are never going to happen. They're never going to come into reality, because even if you go down a path and maybe it doesn't go exactly like you want, you're going to change and make a different decision before you completely fail. And so the odds are it's not going to happen. And you have to keep telling yourself that these things that I am worried about are not going to happen, because I will do something different before they actually happen. And you have to start trying to be better now and try to educate yourself now and get around the right people. You don't want to be around a bunch of negative people. You need to be around positive people. I don't know who said it, but like, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's the truth. You know what I mean? And anytime you start to step out of this line that society teaches, and the rich dad, poor dad, all that stuff, then you're going to be ridiculed, criticized, made fun of, whatever. But, because you're going to be you're not going to be toeing the party line. Go to public school, go to college, get a job, work for somebody for the next 35 or 40 years, get promoted, retire, live off Social Security, and die, right? That is what the majority of people do. That is what society teaches us is success, when it's really not, right? And so I think you have to recognize that does not have to be your lot in life if that's not what you want to do. And you can be an entrepreneur, and you can start a business, and you can educate yourself, and you don't have to go to school and have 4 degrees. Yeah, if you want to be a lawyer, you have to have a law degree, you got to pass the bar. But there are a lot of other businesses that are very successful out there where you don't have to have any education.
Yeah. And you said so many great golden nuggets. The other question I have for you is, this idea. So what you mentioned, are you reading more books versus podcasts? I'm trying to get a sense, because, my nieces and nephew, they watch YouTube to get their information, because it's faster, it's more potent, kind of books take time. But how do you get your information, and what good resources would you recommend to people that resonate with your message?
Yeah, I listen to more podcasts than I do read books, because I can listen to podcasts when I'm exercising in the morning. I have a morning routine, and it's not like one that goes for 5 hours. I don't do cold plunges, and I don't, lift 5,000 pounds and all that. But I mean, I do try to do some version of exercising every day, whether it's walking a mile and a half or 2 miles around my neighborhood, whether it's going to my local gym and getting on the elliptical for 25 or 30 minutes and lifting a few weights, not a ton of weights, but a few weights to get my heart rate going and get oxygen into my blood and stuff like that. And so I listen to podcasts when I'm exercising. I listen to podcasts when I'm driving around in my car. So I do listen to a lot more podcasts than I do books I read. Some of the podcasts that I really enjoy listening to when it comes to mindset is the Mindset Mentor by Rob Dow Jr. He's out of Austin, Texas. I also like to listen to the Successful Mind podcast. And that's one on business and abundance mindset and overcoming scarcity. They talk about that a lot on there. I listen to, for entrepreneurial stuff and leadership, I listen to Creating Disney Magic with Lee Cockrell. He's the retired executive vice president of Disney World, and all the things he learned working at Disney and Marriott and Hilton over his years about customer service and leadership and all of that. I find that those are my three real go-to podcasts when it comes to mindset. I also still listen to other low entrepreneurs who are giving podcasts about how they've scaled their businesses, mistakes they've made, ways to be better, KPIs, management techniques, all of that kind of stuff. But I do read books too. And I hired a business coach back in 2020, and that made a big difference in allowing us to be able to scale this business because I didn't know what I was doing. And once I found that coach, Richard James, if you're a lawyer out there listening and looking to scale, Richard James and Your Practice Mastered is a tremendous coaching program that I've been a part of for the last 4 years. And through that, they mail me books that they want me to read. And so that's how I originally read Think and Grow Rich. And the first time I didn't quite get it, so I read it the second time. And I read some of the Dan Kennedy books because Richard James is a Dan Kennedy disciple, as is a lot of people out there. Dan Kennedy's probably written 20 books. And I'm currently reading I'm currently reading a compilation. Dan Kennedy's books are all about no BS, whatever. And he may be the greatest copywriter of the 20th century when it comes to advertising and marketing and getting your message across. So I read Who Not How by Dan Kennedy. That was a great book as well. And I've read, Ben Glass has a podcast out there. He's a personal injury attorney in Alexandria, Virginia. He also has a coaching program. I read his book, Play Left Fullback, where he talks about being different in the market and not just doing what everybody else does. And I was on his podcast recently. And so, so those are some of the ones that we read and found to be pretty interesting, pretty interesting books. I read both of Joey Coleman's books, Never Lose a Customer Again and Never Lose an Employee Again. Never Lose a Customer Again came out in 2018. Never Lose an Employee Again came out in 2023. I've had a chance to meet Joey Coleman twice. I've been at speeches he's given. They're absolutely fascinating books. I have taken them to heart. I've read them. I've tried to implement them about customer service and the employee experience. And I would highly recommend both of those books to anybody out there if you have a small business or whatever, about customer service and how to recruit and retain the best talent, which is the hardest part of scaling any professional service small business, is the recruiting and maintaining of talent.
Which I want to ask you about, because, you and me, we come from kind of the traditional professions, kind of these well-established law and medicine. And I recommend for my kids and my offspring this is my personal, is to go into artificial intelligence or technology or finance or business as opposed to professions, because these professions are getting decimated by technology. So what are your thoughts? And I know because you have an entrepreneurial mind, and how AI is going to play into this. And they're talking about, like, even in medicine, AI is replacing radiologists, pathologists, in like all these telemedicine. So how do you view AI?
I am not an AI expert in anything, and I don't know a ton about it, but we are trying to implement it a little bit here with some of the drafting and some of the repeatable tasks that we have, doing divorce law here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. And I've seen where AI is starting to replace things in the legal world. What I am looking at is I'm low-key looking for it to make my office more efficient and able to better provide a better client service. I am not worried about AI replacing divorce lawyers and family lawyers because we are advocates. We go to court every day. We're on our feet. We are arguing for child custody, child support, alimony, property distribution, guardianships, adoptions, all of that. And a computer is not going to be able to be an advocate in a courtroom for you ever. The other thing that's starting to happen in the legal world is they've started in Arizona and maybe Utah, but definitely Arizona, where they're allowing non-attorney ownership of law firms. And to this point, all law firms had to be owned by a licensed attorney. Some states are starting to go away from that, and businesses that are experts at marketing and providing customer service and all that are coming in and growing massive law firms in a hurry, particularly in the Phoenix area. And that is interesting. And I think if that starts to go across the country, which I hope it will, because I don't think there's anything special about being an attorney on being able to own a law firm. If you've got licensed attorneys providing the legal work, if you can provide a better service, then you should be able to provide it. And that would lead to the Walmarts and the Costcos of the world getting in to legal services. They're already into eye exams. They're already into banking, and they probably would get into some legal services if they could figure out a way to make money at it, but they're not going to be doing family law. And so I am very fortunate that I chose in the area of law, similar to criminal defense. I did a lot of that early in my career, where AI cannot go and advocate for you. But if you're in some of these other legal industries and in the medical field, then you're going to have to find out what your distinct advantage is, what you can offer that's better than what AI can offer to whatever employer, and show what your value is to that employer.
Yeah. And speaking on the topic of marriage, it was recently I read this statistic that, people don't believe in the concept of marriage anymore. It's very risky for one party, to lose half their assets. And, it's kind of just very one-sided and outdated. And, most marriages don't last and people aren't having kids. So how are you viewing this trend?
Yeah, well, you're right. The percentage of people getting married is going down. I don't know if the divorce rate is going up or staying the same. I hear different numbers, this, that, and the other. But to me, I do a lot of child custody cases here. And so whether you're married or not, if you have a child together and you're separating, then you're going to have issues that are going to have to be addressed to maintain your legal rights and your access to the child. And we're here to help people with that. So the other thing you can do is you can get a prenup. And we see more and more prenups now where, you kind of can still get married, but what you have coming into the marriage is yours. And when you leave, what you get during the marriage is yours. And when you leave, you take what is yours with you. And so that can avoid, you losing the half of what you amassed during your marriage. So, yeah, I mean, marriage is, I'm happily married, have been for over 17 years, but I do think fewer and fewer people are getting married, but it doesn't mean that they're not cohabitating and having children and buying property together and all of those type things that a married couple would do, but they don't have some of the same legal protections as a result. And when they separate, it gets a little bit more complicated, but anything can be worked through. There's laws for everything.
Yeah. And I've heard things such as like conscious uncoupling and just people referring to their significant others as partners as opposed to like spouses, and just really this very interesting demographic trend. So it sounds like you're very successful in this area and you're very entrepreneurial minded. How can people find you and reach out to you, check out your services and follow your work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm my legal website is breedenfirm.com, BREEDEN firm.com. You can reach out to us there if you happen to be in the Raleigh, North Carolina area in search of legal services. I wrote a book called Divorce Law in North Carolina. So if you're listening to this, you're in North Carolina, you might be going to divorce. The book is free, can be downloaded on that website. I am on LinkedIn at Jonathan Breeden. I put stuff up all the time. I have my own podcast where I interview local officials and interesting people and small business owners here in Johnston County, which is in the suburbs of Raleigh. If you're interested in, just sort of the community podcast. I have one of those. I put up clips every day. I'm on LinkedIn at Jonathan Breeden, Breeden. I'm on Twitter at Breeden Law NC. I think I'm on Instagram at Breeden Law Office, and TikTok, if it's still there when this episode comes out. I'm on there as well at Breeden Law Office as well. So we definitely be reached out. I'd be glad to answer any questions about journey, scaling a business. We didn't really get a chance to get into that, signing KPIs and all of the type stuff. But the main thing is, out of this podcast we're talking about today, that you should have an abundance mindset. Whatever you want is available to you in the world. You can achieve anything that you want to achieve if you put your mind to it. And it's not going to be easy. And if you don't quit, you will not fail. And I always say, when you talked about earlier, I have a sign in my office that says, what would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? It's in my break room, and we look at it every day.
Yeah. And I really love that. And so, what I really love is, I've heard that quote so many times, but what is the essence of that quote? What would you attempt if you could not fail? Kind of distill the essence of what it is and the key takeaway.
I mean, I think the thing is that you should not, the anxiety, go back to what we talked about earlier, right? You should not be focusing on, if you fail, what that would look like, what other people would say to you or look at you or whatever. That's what it's saying. If you've pursued your dreams and you could not fail, what would those dreams be? What would you try? Because the reason you don't try is fear of failure. So, and the funny thing is, I bought that sign at the gift shop at Alcatraz in San Francisco at the prison. I don't have anything to do with the prison or not, but that's where I saw the sign, and that's where I bought it. So, and I don't know if they still sell it at the gift shop at Alcatraz. That was 17, 18 years ago when I was at Alcatraz, but I still have that sign in my office, and it's great. And I think about it, and ask my employees that too. Like, what would you try? Like, because that's the reason people don't try, is they're afraid of failing. But if you don't quit, you don't fail, because you can always be better and you can always succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And so thanks so much for coming on, and your passion, your energy, enthusiasm, and keep up the great work.